I'm Bob. I like coffee. I also like to tell stories. So here at the Bobcast Coffee, it's time for a coffee break. So take a coffee break with me and pour yourself a cup of your favorite Joe. By the time you're done with your coffee, you'll know something about me you really didn't need to know. But you'll have fun learning it. Just remember, my stories are true. For the most part. Today's episode is brought to you by Scars and Stripes Coffee. Reynolds Revival has teamed up with Scars and Stripes to put some of the finest coffee in your cup. The highest quality beans are sold by the highest quality people and roasted right here in the USA. So go to www.ss.coffee/REYNOLDS to find out more about the best coffee you're ever going to drink and to purchase cups, shirts, and of course, Scars and Stripes Coffee. That's www.ss.coffee/REYNOLDS or follow the handy link that you'll find in the description. Today I'm enjoying my coffee out of a Scars and Stripes tumbler, 32-ounce tumbler. Let me tell you, nice lid, keeps your coffee warm for a very long time. And to top it all off, it works fabulously for putting hot, delicious coffee into this pie hole. Fabulous coffee. And now, on to wonderful episode 24 of Bob and Motorcycles. Early in 1991, I moved to Pasadena, California. Now, when I say early, I mean I was moving my crap into my new apartment on New Year's Eve. And that wouldn't have taken very long, except I locked myself out of the apartment and had to sit in my Samurai until my buddy Shan came home from work about 1 a.m. Now, one thing I did notice very quickly about living in Pasadena was how bad the traffic was. Not only on New Year's Eve, but all the time. Now, I landed a job quite quickly at the Doubletree Hotel in Pasadena, which was only a short 4-block walk up Colorado Boulevard, but it was long blocks, and it was on Colorado Boulevard. Now, the job provided me income, 1 meal a day, and as many Doubletree chocolate chip cookies as I could stuff into my pockets. What it did not provide was parking. And parking in Pasadena was not cheap. So the Samurai became very difficult to drive around town and very expensive to park. My roommate Shan, on the other hand, had a mid-sized motorcycle, and he had found several hidden little gem of spots that he could park for free. Or he could group a couple of other motorcycle riders and, share the cost of street parking. Obviously, motorcycles, Pasadena, good combination. One night we are sitting around a bar with other starving actors when one of the guys said that he was going to try to sell his motorcycle. And of course, Bob says, in sort of an offhand way, "How much?" And he replied, $200. Never before that night or after should I add, have I, Bob, had just $200 sitting in my pocket with nothing to do. But that night, at that time, I did. And I became the owner of a red 1968 Honda 125 street bike. Now, after a day of changing the spark plugs and charging the battery and fixing the flat tire, I was now the owner of a running red 1968 Honda 125 street bike. So that night I decided I'm going to take it out on the town and see how it rides around Pasadena. Yeah, this is my first motorcycle. I've never actually driven a motorcycle, and I don't even own a helmet. So in a few minutes, Bob is cruising down Colorado Boulevard at 3 in the morning. Do you know who else is driving at 3 in the morning on Colorado Boulevard? I'll tell you, a car full of drunk teenagers. So at a stoplight, this car full of drunk teenagers pull up right behind me, and I mean close. When the light changes, Bob starts to go and, of course, stalls the motorcycle. But the car behind me doesn't stall. He just steps on the gas, like I wasn't even there. And the red 1968 Honda 125 street bike shoots out from underneath Bob's butt, makes contact with the front of the car, and up in the air goes Bob. Now, I like to claim that it was my cat-like reflexes that kept me alive, but it was truly pure luck. And I landed on my feet just a few feet to the side of the car. And I watched my bike roll forward, lose momentum, and fall on its side. The kids now are freaking out, and I personally am just glad to be alive. And after checking my bike, I realized there's really very little damage. It landed on the mirror that was already broken, and it needed to be replaced anyway. Since I don't have a motorcycle license or insurance on the motorcycle, I just picked up my bike, flipped the driver, the bird, and then drove off into the night. Now, the next day, I got insurance and a helmet, and I started looking into the California motorcycle license. Now, I don't know how motorcycle licenses work in other states, but in California, you do not need to take the written test if you already have a California driver's license. Oh wow, that's good coffee. Always take it, when you need it, always take a coffee break. Okay, so first step, I need to get a California driver's license. And that was actually easy, just very time consuming. So about a month later, I'm ready to get my motorcycle license. The practical part of the test is not like a regular driving test. Which makes sense. Where's the grader going to sit, with this clipboard? So down at the DMV in Pasadena, there's an area in the parking lot that has a chain link fence around 3 sides. And painted on the ground is what looks like a keyhole. And it's painted with double lines. And at one point in the test, you got to drive your motorcycle around the key and not let your front tire cross over the lines. Another fun part of the test is that you must back your bike up to one side of the fence, aim at another side of the fence, and then you rev up your engine, and when the RPMs are high, the inspector tells you to go, and you have to stop before you hit the fence on the other side. Now, neither one of these is very hard looking, but when Bob went to drive the key, I was quickly failed. It was actually a lot harder to keep your tires inside those two lines. I sat there and I watched the other bikes fail. And I realized it really is a lot harder than it looks, but I also noticed that the whole time I was there, the other bikers were kind of scoffing at little old Bob and his little old bike, because every other bike there was these large canyon crotch rockets. And everyone seemed to have jackets and helmets that matched their bikes. Bob is in blue jeans and the blue jean jacket and one of the cheapest helmets you can buy. Now, what we have in common is that most everyone there failed the test, and we all have to come back in 2 weeks and try again. Now, the more and more I thought about that day, the more upset about the scoffing and snide remarks of my little old bike. So, for the next 2 weeks, I spent as much time as I could over at the DMV after hours. And I practiced on that key and the braking test. And I learned over this time that no matter how fast or slow I went, I couldn't keep the speed up and the balance right to make it around this key. And with about 3 days before I could test again, I probably had made it successfully around that key 3 or 4 times, but never consecutively. So I'm getting in a panic. I don't want to fail the test a second time, and I really want to pass the practical in front of all those judgmental crotch rocket riding color coordinated sons of bitches. But I gotta find a way to take this tinker toy of a bike and keep it in the lines. Now, I did notice that the slower I could go, the easier it was to stay in the lines, but once the bike started to coast, I would lose balance. So in a pure stroke of, dare I call it, brilliance, I started to mess with the choke and the idle and the throttle, and until the bike was idling fast enough that if I didn't hold the brakes, it would pull itself forward. With a little more practice and a little bit more tinkering, I found the right balance so I could sit upright on that seat, and the right idle speed that if I just eased off the brake, the bike would pull itself forward fast enough to stay up and slow enough that I could stay between the lines every time. The red 1968 Honda Street Bike also had another advantage. Its small size allowed both wheels, front and back, to stay in the lines. So the front end did not need to be manhandled around the key. Those big old canyon racers were long and very unwieldy at a slower pace. And the large engines gave them a lot of torque. Also, not good for this motorcycle testing course that probably hadn't been updated since, let's say 1968. So the day of the rig test comes, and I show up to the DMV with all the other bikers who failed the first time. This time, I'm about halfway in the pack, and once again, I'm just the little old Bob on his little old red 1968 Honda 125 street bike, being jeered at, now openly made fun of. As I am waiting my turn, I'm watching the parade of oversized, color-coordinated, trendy canyon crotch rockets fail the key part of the test. But not all of them are failing. It looks like some of these guys have actually been practicing. And I'm impressed when that first oversized canyon bike passes the key and moves on to the second part, and that's the braking test, where you back your bike up to one of the fences, aim at the other fence, rev up that engine, and then shoot forward and stop before your tire touches the other fence. The first bike to reach this test backs up, revs up, takes off, and slams nose first into the fence on the other side. There's a loud ooh from the crowd, and then silence as people realize the magnitude of what they were facing with their bikes. So out of the 15 or so bikes there, 2 have passed in the first half, and now it's Bob's turn. Now I roll my bike up to the key, and I use my electric start to start the engine. Now, compared to the other monster bikes around me, my bike sounds like a rubber band powered model airplane. And I can see some of the others roll their eyes when I start up my bike. But sitting back on my seat, I release the brake and I keep my hands off the throttle. And the motor pulls the red 1968 Honda 125 street bike slowly but firmly around the key, both tires staying in the lines. And as I exit the key, the inspector waves me over to the fence, and I back the rear tire up against that fence. I'm aimed across to the other side, and he circles his finger in the air, and I rev up the engine, and now it sounds like a Cox model airplane engine. Kind of embarrassing. Now, and he keeps circling his finger, so I keep revving the engine up higher and higher. And now the sound is more like fingernails on a chalkboard. He finally drops his hand. I release the brake and shoot off like lightning toward the other fence. I hit the halfway mark. I apply the brakes, and the tiny red 1968 Honda 125 street bike rapidly decelerates to a stop. And I realize I'm barely 2/3 of the way across this little test area. The inspector puts a check mark in the pass column for Bob, and I, smiling, slowly ride my triumphant red 1968 Honda 125 street bike past the row of canyon crotch rockets, and when I reach the end of that line, a young punk kid in his color coordinating jacket and bike waves me over. "Hey dude, can I borrow your bike?" Yeah, I don't think so. And that's how Bob started his Rebel Without a Clue life, riding his red 1968 Honda 125 street bike all around Southern California. But don't worry, I lived through that part of my life too. Until next time, enjoy some coffee.